How does a quiet black nurse go from being humiliated in front of her team to standing in a room and saying, "Actually, I think you've forgotten"? This isn't just any hospital drama, it's a true battle of dignity versus arrogance. Imagine a top surgeon who screams, "You don't get to do this," while the entire staff holds its breath. What would you do if you discovered the person everyone dismissed actually held all the power? Dive into this gripping story of injustice, courage, and an unexpected twist no one saw coming. Dear viewer, if you are watching my story for the first time, I humbly request you write the location from where you are watching right now, subscribe this channel and press the bell icon now not to miss the notifications of my daily published news stories. Thank you, and let's dive into the full story. Henrietta Ellis arrived at the clinic at 5:45 a.m. as she always did, unlocking the staff door with a small jingle of keys. She wore her simple navy blue scrubs, a white coat folded over her arm. Her hair was neatly tied back, silver at the temples, though her eyes missed nothing. No one else was in yet, except for the cleaning crew mopping quietly. She nodded to them, always polite. She walked the hallways and checked the supply closets herself, making notes on her small pad. At precisely 6:15 a.m., Dr. Everett Strickland arrived in his sleek, glinting silver sports car. He strode in without a word to the cleaners. The staff at the front desk straightened in fear. Strickland was famous in this city for his surgical skill, but also for his cruelty. He barked orders without looking anyone in the eye. When he saw Henrietta in the main corridor, he stopped and sneered. "Well. Early as usual, Nurse Ellis. Keeping busy doing, what, exactly? Counting band-aids?" She smiled faintly, not meeting his eyes too long. "Good morning, Dr. Strickland. Just checking stock. We're missing some suture kits in or 3. He scoffed, ignoring her note. "Tell procurement. That's not my job. And next time, don't clutter the hallway." He swept past her, lab coat billowing. Behind him, 2 residents exchanged a look of pity. Everyone in the clinic knew the hierarchy. Dr. Strickland was the star, the one who brought in wealthy patients, the one who intimidated the staff. The other doctors and nurses learned to avoid direct conflict. Henrietta simply made her note in silence. During the morning huddle, Dr. Strickland took over as usual. He went over the day's surgeries in condescending detail, quizzing junior staff to humiliate them. When one nurse flubbed the supply request form, he slammed it on the table. "Why do we keep incompetent people here?" The room went silent. The nurse flushed, mumbling. Henrietta cleared her throat. "I'll take care of it," she said evenly. "Oh, will you?" Strickland turned, eyes glinting. "Our savior, Nurse Ellis. Honestly, why is she even in this meeting? Go coordinate bedpans." No one spoke up for her. The meeting ended with a dismissive wave of his hand. By mid-morning, Henrietta was checking pre-op charts while the waiting room filled with wealthy patients, many of whom specifically requested Strickland. A new physician's assistant whispered to Henrietta that she didn't know how anyone could stand working for him. Henrietta just gave her a quiet look. Later that day, Strickland lost his temper in the OR when a suture kit was missing. He turned on the circulating nurse. "Did you train in a barn?" he snapped. "Get me Ellis. Now." Henrietta entered calmly. He pointed at her as if summoning a dog. "Is this your idea of supply management? I'm in the middle of a $15,000 procedure. This is malpractice waiting to happen." Henrietta's voice was measured. "We had a shortage, and I notified procurement. I have a backup kit in my locker." She sent an aide to fetch it. He glared at her the whole time. "You'd think after 30 years wiping up blood, you'd learn how to stock a shelf." Henrietta said nothing. She handed over the kit and left quietly. Outside, one of the surgical residents whispered to her. "Don't let him talk to you like that." Henrietta gave a small, weary smile. "It's fine. I've seen worse." But in her office, a small, windowless room marked, Head Nurse. She sat for a moment with her pad and pen. She made 2 notes, follow up on missing supplies. Meeting with the board next week. She capped the pen, folded the pad, and slipped it into her bag. She stood, adjusted her coat, and walked back to the floor, her face calm. No one in the building knew she was the majority owner. Not even Strickland. And she wasn't planning to tell him yet. But the day would come. And when it did, she would see exactly how much respect Dr. Strickland commanded when he was the one answering for his failures. By the next morning, the entire clinic was buzzing with talk of Dr. Strickland's tantrum in the OR. Staff whispered about how he'd cursed out a nurse so harshly she'd gone home crying. But no one would confront him. After all, he was the reason the clinic's wealthy clientele kept flowing in. Henrietta heard the talk as she moved from station to station. She kept her voice gentle when she reminded them to watch their gossip. She knew it wasn't about protecting Strickland, it was about protecting the patients. But the tension was rising. Strickland himself was worse than ever. At 6:30 a.m. he was already barking at the receptionists about the day's schedule. You can't even alphabetize a damn chart. Christ, this place would fall apart without me. He didn't see Henrietta standing at the side door, quietly signing for a shipment of meds. When she did approach him with an urgent form, he snatched it out of her hand and scanned it with contempt. More of your paperwork obsession, he said. What is this, another memo about missing gauze? It's a sterilization order, she said levelly. You need to sign it so we can have the equipment ready for your 10 a.m. He scrawled a sloppy signature without reading it. You're welcome, he added, voice dripping with sarcasm. She didn't answer. Later, as staff gathered in the cramped break room for coffee, Henrietta overheard them. I can't take it, whispered one young tech. He screamed at me in front of a patient. I wanted to quit on the spot. He calls me girl, like I'm his maid, said another nurse, rolling her eyes. He said I didn't have the IQ to hold a scalpel, grumbled a resident. They fell silent when they saw Henrietta. She sipped her coffee calmly. You all deserve better, she said quietly. But don't you quit. Let him be the one to show who he is. They looked at her in surprise. A few hours later, the first real blow-up happened. Strickland was halfway through a minor procedure when the anesthesiologist called out a warning about a dosage discrepancy. Strickland lost it, accusing the nurse of nearly killing the patient. He screamed at her in front of 2 residents and the surgical tech. The nurse burst into tears and left the OR. Strickland finished the surgery with a scowl, muttering about incompetent staff, ignoring the pale anesthesiologist. Henrietta was waiting outside. When the nurse emerged, sobbing, Henrietta took her gently by the arm and led her to a chair. She handed her tissues, said nothing until the crying slowed. I'll handle it, Henrietta promised. She turned and walked straight into the OR. Strickland was scrubbing out, cursing under his breath. You can't just scream at people like that, Henrietta said, voice low. He swung on her. Oh, here she is. Mother hen to save the day. This is a professional environment, she continued. No, this is my OR, he snapped. You don't get to lecture me. You're a nurse. You take orders. Don't forget your place. Her eyes didn't waver. You're damaging this team. And risking the clinic's reputation. He laughed. Reputation? They come for me, not you. Not any of you. She didn't reply. Instead, she took out her small notebook and calmly made a note. Strickland snorted in disgust. Oh, are you going to file your little report? Who do you think will read it? The board? They don't care. They need me. Without me, this place is a strip mall with bandages. She closed her notebook. I'm going to speak with the board. Go ahead, he said, smirking. They'll side with me. She left without another word. The hallway outside was quiet. Staff pretended not to have heard, but everyone had. Word spread fast. In her office, Henrietta sat down, breathing deeply. She opened a folder on her desk marked, "Board Minutes." Inside was a schedule for next week's meeting. Her name was at the top. Majority owner. No one else knew. Not yet. But they would. She closed the folder and rested her palms on it. She wasn't going to let Strickland poison this place forever. He thought he was untouchable. He was about to learn the truth. Henrietta spent the next few days in quiet observation, clipboard in hand, eyes taking in every detail of the clinic's operation. The staff felt her steady presence. When things threatened to boil over, an aide in tears after being called useless by Strickland, a resident shaking with embarrassment after being dressed down for asking a question, Henrietta would intervene. Not loudly. Not confrontationally. But enough to calm them, reassure them, keep them going. Meanwhile, Strickland's behavior only worsened. He bragged constantly about a high-profile surgery he had scheduled next week, a wealthy businessman willing to pay out of pocket for a complicated procedure. "That case alone pays your salaries," he sneered to staff in the break room. During morning rounds, he insulted a junior doctor so viciously that she nearly quit on the spot. Henrietta caught her in the hallway afterward. "Don't give him the satisfaction," Henrietta said softly. The young doctor swallowed tears. "He treats us like trash. Like we're all replaceable." Henrietta nodded. "He forgets who's replaceable here." But the staff didn't know what she meant. On Thursday, the board liaison arrived, a slim, fast-talking man named Mr. Cullen. He was used to dealing with Henrietta only as head nurse and usually brushed her off. But this time, she met him in her small office and handed him a folder marked, "Operational Concerns." He frowned. "What's this?" "Documentation," Henrietta said calmly. "Of staff complaints. Patient safety issues. Or disruptions." He flipped it open and scanned it, brow furrowing. "Strickland's going to fight this," he muttered. "I'm not afraid of that," Henrietta replied. Cullen blinked at her. She didn't elaborate. That afternoon, Henrietta called a staff meeting in the conference room. She didn't make it mandatory, but most showed up, curiosity getting the better of them. She stood at the head of the table, calm and collected in her white coat. "First," she began, "I want to thank everyone for the work you're doing. I know it isn't easy." Murmurs of uncomfortable agreement filled the room. She raised a hand. "I also want to make something clear. Abuse is not part of your job. Not from patients. Not from doctors. Not from anyone." Silence. A few glances toward the door, half expecting Strickland to burst in. Henrietta went on. "If you experience harassment, I want it documented. I will see it's addressed. No retaliation will be tolerated." A nurse spoke up timidly. "Isn't that up to Dr. Strickland?" Henrietta's eyes didn't waver. "No," she said. "It's up to us." She left them with that. The news spread like fire. The next morning, Strickland showed up late, storming in with his phone pressed to his ear, barking at some poor administrator. When he hung up, he noticed the staff looking at him strangely. "What?" he snapped. No one answered. He strode into Henrietta's office without knocking. She looked up from her notes. "Dr. Strickland," she said evenly. "Don't you ever call a meeting without me again," he said, voice tight with rage. "It was a staff meeting," she replied. "I'm staff," he said with mocking exaggeration. "I'm the staff." She closed her notebook calmly. "It was about conduct in this clinic. Including yours." He barked a short, bitter laugh. "You're out of line, nurse. You don't dictate policy. You don't speak for the board. Don't forget where you stand." She stood. "I think you've forgotten." He scowled. "I'm warning you," he said, voice low, leaning in so close she could smell his coffee and anger. I don't know who you think you are, but you're nothing without me. The board knows it. The patients know it. I make this place. Don't test me. She didn't flinch. Thank you for your feedback, she said coolly. He slammed the door on the way out. Outside, he saw staff quickly scattering so they wouldn't meet his eyes. That day, he berated a medical assistant so loudly that a patient in the waiting room heard it. Complaints were filed. Henrietta collected them without comment. She placed them in a new folder. This one she labeled, Evidence. In the break room that evening, a cluster of nurses and aides sat quietly, exhausted. Henrietta walked in, placed a fresh pot of coffee in front of them. You're doing good work, she said. They looked up at her. How can you stand him? One asked. Henrietta gave a small, knowing smile. I don't plan to stand him much longer, she said. Then she turned and walked out, leaving them buzzing with curiosity and cautious hope. By Monday morning, the mood in the clinic had changed from resignation to anxious anticipation. Staff whispered that something was happening behind the scenes. They weren't sure what, but Henrietta's calm certainty in the last meeting lingered in their minds. Dr. Strickland was oblivious to the undercurrent. Or he didn't care. He stomped through the main corridor, clipboard in hand, bellowing for the charge nurse who was cowering behind the nurse's station. He berated her for scheduling an unqualified scrub nurse for his big surgery that afternoon. Don't you idiots know how important this procedure is? We have a VIP in pre-op. I don't want that fool touching my instruments. The nurse mumbled an apology. Henrietta was at the end of the hall, calmly checking inventory. She turned and walked toward them slowly. Dr. Strickland, she said quietly. He rounded on her. Don't you start with me today, Ellis. She didn't flinch. She is qualified. Certified for advanced procedures. Signed off last month. I don't care. I said no. Swap her out. Henrietta folded her arms. I won't do that. She's earned it. She's on rotation for a reason. He stepped closer, face red. You're not in charge here. She stared at him for a long moment. I disagree. He barked a laugh. You want to play boss? Go ahead. But when this patient sues for incompetent staff, that's on you. Hope your little clipboard can pay the settlement. He turned on his heel and left the hall in angry strides. The other nurses watched in awe. You told him no, someone whispered. Henrietta turned back to them, her voice quiet but firm. I'm telling all of you no. No more being treated like you're worthless. A few nodded. Some looked terrified. But hope was catching. That afternoon's surgery was tense. Henrietta made sure the team was prepped, calmed, and ready. The new scrub nurse's hands shook a little, but Henrietta caught her eye through the glass and nodded once. You can do this. Inside the OR, Strickland was as icy as a glacier. He didn't speak except to snarl orders. The procedure went perfectly. When it was done, he stripped off his gloves and glared at the team. Barely acceptable, he said, voice dripping with disdain. Henrietta was waiting outside the OR door. How did it go? She asked the scrub nurse, ignoring Strickland completely. I did it, the nurse whispered. Yes, you did, Henrietta said, smiling gently. Strickland shoved past them. Save the after-school special crap for your grandkids, he snapped. She watched him go, eyes narrowing. That evening, Henrietta stayed late. She sat in her small office under fluorescent lights that buzzed like insects. On her desk was the folder marked Evidence. She added more notes, today's outburst, witnesses, details. She stapled the complaint forms behind her log entries. She checked her watch. 6:45 p.m. She picked up her phone and dialed the board liaison. Cullen here, the voice answered. This is Henrietta Ellis. Pause. Yes. Nurse Ellis. How can I help you? I need the board to know I'm calling an extraordinary session. I'll need the main conference room booked on Wednesday at 8 a.m. This isn't typically something you can just check my ownership share, she said. Calm. Cold. Check the bylaws. Then confirm the reservation. Silence on the line. Finally, yes, Ms. Ellis. She hung up, placed the phone carefully on the desk. For a moment, she just sat there. Years of work. Of listening. Of being dismissed. Of watching people like Strickland poison the culture, drive good staff away, risk patient safety for their ego. She'd tried warnings. She'd tried private corrections. She'd tried patience. Enough. She turned off the lamp. As she walked out of the dark office, the empty clinic hallways felt heavy with tension. But Henrietta's steps were steady. She wasn't the head nurse anymore. She was the owner. And Wednesday morning, everyone would see exactly what that meant. Tuesday dawned with a brittle tension in the air. The staff came in looking over their shoulders, whispering about the meeting Henrietta had called. Rumors flew, that she was quitting, that Strickland was leaving, that the clinic was being sold. Strickland himself seemed unusually buoyant. He arrived late in a tailored suit instead of scrubs, and spent most of the morning schmoozing a high-profile patient in the VIP suite. He shook hands, laughed his deep, practiced laugh, and told stories about how he'd personally saved more lives than the local ER. Henrietta watched from the nurse's station. She said nothing, merely jotted a note in her small pad. Around noon, Strickland cornered her in the hallway. "So," he said mockingly, "I hear you're planning some kind of meeting tomorrow." "Very cute." "It's not cute," she replied evenly. He stepped in closer, dropping his voice. "You think you can embarrass me in front of the board? They love me. I make them money. I have a waiting list out the door. You're a line item in payroll." She regarded him with quiet, steady eyes. "You're very confident," she said. He smirked. "Of course. Because I'm right. I don't know why you're starting this fight, Ellis. You're going to lose. And I'm going to make sure you crawl back in here begging for your job after I'm done." Henrietta didn't flinch. "Thank you for the warning," she said calmly. He leaned back, almost disappointed at her lack of fear. "You're pathetic," he spat. "Acting like you matter. This place is mine. I built it. Tomorrow you'll see." She didn't reply. She turned away and continued down the hall to the break room. Inside, 3 nurses sat in a hush, their eyes wide. They'd heard the whole thing. "Ms. Ellis," one whispered. What is going on?" Henrietta set her pad on the table. "And Saturday, what's going on," she said evenly, "is that he's forgotten who this clinic is really for. Who it's supposed to serve. It depends on." They glanced at each other nervously. She went on. "I've watched him for years. How he humiliates you. Threatens you. Risks the patients to stroke his egos. And the board let him, because he made money." They nodded, silent. She tapped the pad lightly with one finger. "That ends tomorrow." "Are you firing him?" one asked in a small voice. Henrietta's eyes met hers. "Yes." Silence. The words hung in the air like something sacred. One of the nurses swallowed. "Can you do that?" Henrietta's expression didn't change. "I can. And I will." The rest of the day moved in anxious slow motion. Strickland seemed to sense the tension but misread it entirely, strutting about like a king in his castle. He gave orders he didn't need to, criticized charts for typos that didn't exist, and made sure everyone knew about his VIP procedure the next week. Henrietta went about her work with quiet efficiency. She checked stock levels. She calmed a patient's nervous family member. She helped an aide fix a malfunctioning 4-pump. She collected 2 more incident reports about Strickland's language in the OR that morning. By evening, the clinic was nearly empty. She stood by the front door, watching the last of the staff leave. The sunset bled orange and purple through the glass. She turned and locked the door behind her. Walking back through the quiet halls, she paused by the surgical suite, looking in at the empty table, the gleaming tools. She remembered every life saved here. Every life is endangered by arrogance. She let out a long breath. Then she went to her office, opened her locked cabinet, and retrieved the folder marked Evidence. She placed it carefully in her bag. She also took out another folder, Ownership Documents. It had her name in bold. It had the signatures. The bylaws. She closed the bag. When she turned off the light, the office fell into darkness. But tomorrow, she knew, everything would come into the light. She left the clinic and walked out into the warm night air. Head high. Heart steady. Ready. Wednesday dawned clear and cool. Staff arrived early, glancing around nervously, speaking in hushed tones. They'd all heard, there was a special meeting scheduled for 8 a.m. in the main conference room. The air was heavy with dread and curiosity. Strickland arrived last, sauntering in with his white coat perfectly pressed. He stopped at the nurse's station, smirk on his face. "So today's the big show," he drawled. The charge nurse swallowed. He winked at her. "Don't worry. I'll make sure they know how valuable the good staff are. Unlike some." He turned and strode to the conference room like he owned the place. Inside, the board was assembling. There were 6 of them, men and women in neat business suits, most of whom knew Strickland well. They were murmuring about the agenda item Henrietta had demanded. Henrietta walked in calmly at 7:55 a.m., her dark blue scrubs perfectly pressed, her white coat over one arm, bag in hand. She greeted each board member by name, eyes steady, voice calm. "Thank you all for coming," she said. Strickland was lounging in a chair at the far end of the table, legs crossed arrogantly. "Ah," he announced, "our fearless head nurse. Ready to embarrass yourself?" The board fell silent. Henrietta didn't look at him. She placed her bag on the table, unzipped it carefully, and removed 2 folders. She laid them out with precise movements. "Let's begin," she said quietly. Mr. Cullen, the liaison, cleared his throat nervously. "The agenda says you called this meeting under emergency authority." "That's correct," Henrietta said. Strickland snorted. "You don't have the authority for that." Henrietta turned. "Actually," she said calmly, "I do." She slid the second folder toward the board. Inside were signed papers showing the original purchase agreement, the investor breakdown, and the clinic bylaws. Her name is in bold letters. Majority owner. The board members flipped through it, frowning. Strickland leaned forward, scoffing. "What is this? You forged something?" Henrietta didn't look at him. She addressed the board directly. "Per the bylaws," she said, voice even, "the majority owner can call an emergency session to address patient safety concerns and staff conduct. I am exercising that right today." A stunned silence fell over the room. One board member cleared his throat. "Ms. Bellis, this says you hold 51%. "Yes," she said. Strickland pushed back his chair so hard it screeched. "This is insane," he spat. "You're a nurse. You don't know anything about running a clinic. You're here because I built this place with my skills. Without me, you're nothing." Henrietta opened the other folder. Inside were the complaint forms. The logs. The incident reports. Signed. Documented. She began laying them out on the table, one by one. "Verbal abuse of staff," she said. Documented. Threatening behavior. Patient safety incidents. An anesthesiologist's testimony about a near error last week. Nurses in tears. Residents wanting to quit. Strickland was turning red. "You don't get to do this," he snapped. She didn't even look at him. "I'm not done," she said. She pulled out more papers. Patient complaints. Referrals are threatened if they don't praise you. Staff turnover up by 20% in 6 months. One board member shifted uncomfortably. Strickland's voice cracked. "They're incompetent. I'm the only reason this place is profitable." Henrietta's eyes were ice. "You're the only reason it's toxic." Silence. She let that hang. Then she sat down. "I didn't want this. I tried talking to you. I tried warning you. But you refused to change. And I will not watch you destroy good people or risk patients because you think you're untouchable." Strickland tried to speak, but one of the board members raised a hand. "Strickland. Please let her finish." Henrietta folded her hands. "As the majority owner, I'm terminating Dr. Everett Strickland's employment with cause. Effective immediately. His credentials will be suspended pending further review by the licensing board. He will not enter the OR again." The words fell like a hammer. Strickland slammed his palm on the table. "You can't do this. I'll sue you. I'll ruin you." Henrietta's voice didn't rise. "You're welcome to try," she said. The board members exchanged stunned looks. Finally, one of them said, "Ms. Ellis, do you have a plan for continuity of care? For his patients?" She nodded calmly. "I have surgeons lined up for the transition. I've spoken to them. They're ready. The patients will not suffer because of his ego." Strickland lunged for the folders, but Cullen blocked him. "This meeting is adjourned," Cullen said shakily. Strickland roared with rage. "You'll regret this. All of you. This place is finished without me." Henrietta stood. "We'll see," she said. She picked up her folders, turned her back on him, and walked out. The last thing she heard was Strickland's furious curses echoing down the hall. Outside the conference room, the staff had gathered. They fell silent as she emerged. She looked at them. "It's done," she said simply. For a moment, no one spoke. Then a slow ripple of disbelief and relief spread. Someone clapped. Another nurse cried. Henrietta let out a slow breath. It was only the beginning. But the first, hardest step was done. The clinic was in chaos for the rest of the morning. Word of Strickland's firing spread through the halls like wildfire. Staff huddled in corners, phones buzzed with texts and calls, and the front desk had to reassure patients whose appointments with the star surgeon were suddenly cancelled. Henrietta moved through the mess with calm precision. She posted a staff-wide email from her small office. Effective immediately, Dr. Everett Strickland is no longer employed by this clinic. All procedures under his care will be reallocated. Staff will receive new assignments by noon. I am available for questions and concerns. She pressed send, then took a moment to breathe. This was the part she knew would test her even more than standing up to Strickland. It was one thing to remove the problem. It was another to clean up the damage. By mid-morning, a line of nurses, assistants, and junior doctors had formed at her door. They came in one by one, some angry, some scared, some tearful. "I don't want to work here if it's going to be like this," one nurse blurted. "We're going to lose all the rich patients. We're going to close." Henrietta listened without interrupting. "I understand," she said when the nurse finished. "But I won't let this place close. And I won't let it run on abuse." "But, he was the best surgeon in town." "He was a skilled surgeon," she corrected gently. "But that doesn't make him the best. The best know how to treat people." The nurse blinked at her. "Give me time," Henrietta said. "Stay. Help me rebuild this the right way." The nurse nodded slowly and left. Another aide came in, pale and anxious. "He threatened me. Last week. Said he'd make sure I never worked in medicine again. Henrietta leaned forward. Not anymore, she said. No one here will be threatened for doing their job. The aide burst into tears of relief. Henrietta handed her tissues and waited until she calmed down. She did this over and over. Each meeting was the same: fear, anger, uncertainty. She listened. She promised them change. She asked them to trust her. At noon, she gathered the entire staff in the main conference room. There were too many to sit, so they stood along the walls, arms crossed, faces wary. Henrietta stood at the head of the table. "Thank you for coming," she began. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't pound the table. She just spoke plainly. "Many of you are afraid. That's fair. You've seen how Dr. Strickland treated you. You saw that no one stopped him. Until now." A hush fell. She scanned the room. "I'm not going to pretend this will be easy. We're going to lose some patients. Some referring doctors will be angry. Some staff may leave." She let that hang a moment. "But we're going to build something better. A place where patients come because they trust us. Where staff stay because they're respected. Where no one is above the rules." A nervous shifting of feet. But less resistance. She nodded once. "I need you. All of you. We can't do it alone. I'll be here every day. I'll listen. I'll help. But I'm asking you to do the same." A resident raised a tentative hand. "Why didn't you tell us you owned the clinic?" Henrietta held his gaze. "Because I didn't want it to change how you did your jobs. I wanted to see the truth of this place. And I did." Another nurse spoke up. "What if he tries to come back?" "He won't," Henrietta said firmly. Silence. Then, slowly, someone in the back began to clap. Others joined. It wasn't thunderous, but it was real. A few tears were wiped away. Henrietta didn't smile. She just nodded once, her eyes shining. "Let's get back to work," she said. They filed out more quietly, talking in low, serious voices. She stayed behind a moment. The conference room was empty again. She exhaled, long and shaking. The first battle was over. But the war for this clinic's soul had just begun. By Thursday morning, the clinic was a different place. Not better, at least not yet, but undeniably changed. The staff walked the halls with wide eyes, unsure if they should be relieved or terrified. The air buzzed with phone calls to patients explaining schedule changes, cancellations, and reschedulings. The VIPs were furious. Henrietta expected it. She spent half the morning in her tiny office taking calls from well-heeled donors and wealthy clients who demanded Strickland back. "You'll ruin your own business," one man sneered over the line. "Do you have any idea what his reputation means?" Henrietta kept her voice steady. "I understand your concerns. But the clinic's priority is safe, ethical care. Dr. Strickland no longer meets that standard. Don't get high and mighty with me. I'll take my business elsewhere." "I'm sorry to hear that." She hung up without slamming the receiver. In the hall, the staff watched her warily. She knew what they were thinking. Was she scared yet? Was she regretting it? She didn't show them anything but calm. After her fourth call, she stood in the doorway and addressed them directly. "Listen up. If any patient threatens you, if any referring office pressures you, send them to me. You don't have to handle it alone." A few staff smiled, brittle but real. By midday, the worst of the administrative scramble had settled down. Henrietta gathered the department heads in the break room. They sat around the old wobbly table, exhaustion on every face. She handed out copies of a new schedule. "Here's how we're going to reassign Strickland's caseload," she said. The OR manager shook his head. "This is a nightmare, Henrietta. Half of these patients will leave." "I know," she said. Let them. He blinked. She folded her hands. I'd rather lose the wrong patients than keep them with the wrong doctor. We'll rebuild the right way. Silence. The anesthesiologist, who had once nearly left over Strickland's abuse, spoke up softly. I'm in, he said. I'll cover whatever cases I can. Just don't let someone like him run the OR again. Henrietta met his eyes. Never again. A slow murmur of agreement spread. Heads nodded. That afternoon, a formal letter went out on clinic letterhead, drafted by Henrietta herself. Effective immediately, Dr. Everett Strickland is no longer affiliated with this clinic. All patient care will be transitioned to qualified staff who share our commitment to safety, respect, and excellence. We regret any inconvenience and appreciate your understanding. She signed it at the bottom. Henrietta Ellis, RN, majority owner. Word got around fast. Local papers even picked it up. She refused to comment. She was too busy reviewing HR records, checking that staff who'd been bullied hadn't quit already. She called 3 nurses who had left the previous month. One agreed to come back. By evening, she was exhausted. She sat in her small office under the buzzing fluorescent light, pinching the bridge of her nose. She looked at the old photo on her desk, one from years ago, staff smiling at a clinic holiday party. Before Strickland had gotten so powerful. Before the fear. She remembered what it had felt like to love working here. That was what she wanted back. At 7:30 p.m., the halls were empty except for the cleaning crew. Henrietta walked the floors one last time. She checked supply closets. She smiled at the janitor and thanked him by name. She stood outside the OR for a long time, looking through the window at the silent, gleaming space. She thought of all the lives saved here. All lives are at risk from arrogance. She thought of the young nurses who had cried in the bathroom. The residents who'd almost quit medicine. The aides were humiliated in front of patients. She pressed one palm to the glass. Never again. Then she turned and walked out. She locked the front door behind her, the key heavy in her hand. Outside, the night was cool and quiet. She felt the weight of everything pressing down on her shoulders. But for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel powerless. She felt in control. And she wasn't going to waste that. Thursday bled into Friday with the clinic still in upheaval. The front desk staff looked exhausted from endless calls, many of them angry. Patients demanded their surgeries back on the schedule, demanded Strickland by name, and demanded explanations they didn't want to hear. Henrietta stayed visible. She refused to hide in her office. Instead, she stood at the reception counter, answering calls herself, talking quietly with furious patients. No, Dr. Strickland is no longer with us. I'm sorry you feel that way. I'm happy to provide your records so you can transfer your care. Some hung up on her. Others threatened lawsuits. A few, very few, paused to listen when she explained patient safety, staff treatment, and why this decision had been necessary. She didn't expect gratitude. She didn't need it. She just needed them to know the truth. By mid-morning, she gathered the department heads again, this time in the small meeting room that smelled faintly of coffee and antiseptic. She laid out new forms on the table. These are the updated staff policies, she said. Read them. You'll see there's now a zero-tolerance line for harassment, threats, verbal abuse. That includes me. No exceptions. They picked up the pages with wary curiosity. Discipline, one asked. Immediate review by me or the HR liaison. Documented. Progressive if minor. Immediate termination if severe. Another spoke up. What about patients? Some of them are difficult. Henrietta nodded. Good question. Same rule. Staff will have support. No one here works under threat. If patients can't accept that, they'll go elsewhere. There was silence. Then one of the senior nurses let out a slow breath. "I didn't think I'd see the day," she whispered. Henrietta met her eyes. "Now you have. Let's make it count." That afternoon, she met with the clinic's billing manager. They went over the financial projections. He was pale. "Strickland's surgeries were half our private billing. If even a quarter of those patients leave." Henrietta nodded. "I know. I've accounted for it." He frowned. "Cutbacks?" "No," she said. "Recruitment. Some good surgeons want work but wouldn't touch this place while he was here. I've got 3 on my shortlist." He blinked. She handed him the list. "They're not prima donnas. They're solid. We pay them fairly, treat them with respect, and this clinic's reputation will rebuild. Slowly. But we will." The billing manager leaned back. "Hell of a gamble." Henrietta's gaze was unflinching. "It's not a gamble. It's a plan." Friday evening, she held another full staff meeting in the conference room. No one skipped it. They all wanted to hear what was next. She stood at the head of the table, the fluorescent lights making everything too bright. "First," she said, "thank you. This has been one of the hardest weeks this clinic has ever faced. And you didn't run." Some shifted uncomfortably. "You deserve to know this wasn't a decision I made lightly. Dr. Strickland was an excellent surgeon. But he failed us in every other way. He humiliated you. He endangered patients. He cost us good staff. I won't have it." There was silence. A few people nodded. "I know we're going to lose business. That's fine. I'd rather have half the revenue with twice the integrity. If that's not what you want, tell me now." No one spoke. She let the silence settle like dust. Then she nodded. "Good. Because this is your clinic now as much as mine. If you see something wrong, tell me. If you have ideas, bring them. If you need help, ask. I'm not hiding in an office while you do the work." A nurse in the back raised her hand, voice shaking. Why did you wait so long to do this?" Henrietta exhaled. "Because I hoped he would change," she said honestly. "I gave him every chance. I wanted to believe he could be better. But some people won't change until you take away the power they abuse." Silence. She scanned the room. "You all deserve better. This place will be better. That's my promise to you. If you'll stay, help me build it." One by one, heads nodded. Someone began to clap. Others joined. This time, it grew. It filled the room. Henrietta felt her throat tighten. She didn't let herself cry. She waited until the applause faded. Then she gave one last nod. "Let's get back to work," she said. And they did. Monday morning dawned with a kind of fragile hope in the air. The front desk staff arrived early, still pale with stress, but they set to work calling patients calmly. The surgical team checked their schedules, seeing new names, local surgeons Henrietta had reached out to over the weekend. They weren't celebrities. They weren't braggarts. But they were good. And they wanted the work. Henrietta met each one personally in the lobby. "Thank you for coming," she said, shaking hands. "You'll find this place in transition. I won't lie about that. But I expect you to treat staff with respect, patients with care, and rules as non-negotiable. Can you do that?" They all said yes. A few looked nervous. But most looked relieved. Word traveled fast in the medical community. No one liked working with Strickland if they could help it. Some had avoided this clinic for years. Now they had a chance to come back. The staff took cautious, grateful note of this shift. That morning, Henrietta did her old rounds, but not as the head nurse, trying to smooth things over. She was the owner. And she didn't hide it anymore. She checked the stock. She greeted patients in the waiting room. She sat for 10 minutes with a new surgical tech who confessed she was terrified of screwing up. "You'll make mistakes," Henrietta said honestly. "We all do. Own them. Learn from them. No one here will humiliate you for it." The tech nearly cried with relief. When she walked the halls, staff didn't avoid her eyes anymore. They greeted her carefully at first, then more openly. "You okay?" someone asked. Henrietta gave a small, tired smile. "Not yet," she admitted. "But we will be." By mid-morning, she held her first real leadership meeting as the acknowledged owner. The conference room was packed, some sitting on windowsills or leaning against the walls. Henrietta stood at the head of the table, papers in hand. "First," she said, voice clear, "this is going to be a difficult quarter. We will lose revenue. We'll lose patients who don't want to hear why we made this change. I won't sugarcoat that." The room was silent. "But," she went on, "we will also gain people. Patients who want to be treated as human beings, not dollar signs. Staff who want a workplace that respects them. Doctors who want to heal, not terrorize. It's on us to make this a place they want to be." She paused. "No more looking the other way. If you see harassment, bullying, or negligence, you report it. I don't care if it's a surgeon or a janitor. No one is above this policy." Someone in the back muttered, "Finally." Henrietta heard it. She didn't hide her small, grim smile. "Second," she said, "we're reviewing pay rates. Don't cheer yet, it's not all raises. But it will be fair. Overtime, shift differentials, on-call policies, HR will make sure you're paid what you're owed." This time, a few smiles appeared. "Third," she continued, "I will be here. On the floor. Not just in meetings. If you need me, you find me." A tentative hand went up. Do you own the clinic?" She nodded. "Yes." A murmur swept the room. Another voice called, "Why didn't you tell us?" Henrietta met their gaze. "Because I wanted to see the truth. And because I wasn't ready to lead." Silence. Then, softly, someone asked, "Are you ready now?" Henrietta exhaled. "I am." That was it. No rousing speech. No fancy words. Just the truth. Slowly, the room began to fill with something new. Not fear. Not anger. Commitment. A nurse who'd nearly quit last week leaned forward. "I'm staying." A resident who'd cried after Strickland's screaming nodded. "Me too." One by one, heads nodded. Henrietta let them have the moment. Then she closed her folder. "Good," she said quietly. "Let's get to work." They filed out slowly, talking in low voices, a kind of relief settling over them. Henrietta lingered in the doorway, watching them go. She knew this wasn't over. The patients would complain. Those old board members would grumble about lost revenue. That recruiting would be hard. But she also knew something else. This was her clinic now. And for the first time in years, it felt like it was worth saving. She turned back into the empty conference room and let out one long, slow breath. Then she gathered her folders. And walked out to join her staff. Ready to build something better. Dear friend, respect isn't optional, it's the foundation of real leadership. This story is a reminder that no title or degree excuses cruelty or abuse. Every worker deserves safety, dignity, and to be heard, no matter their role or background. Let's build workplaces where people lift each other up instead of tearing them down. If this message matters to you, please like this video and subscribe to this channel. Together, we can spread awareness, inspire change, and support every person who refuses to stay silent in the face of injustice. Your support helps these important stories reach the people who need them most.